Anino sa Likod ng Buwan is written and directed by Jun Lana and stars LJ Reyes, Luis Alandi, and Anthony Falcon. And Anino sa Likod ng Buwan is set in a remote village in the Philippines in the 1990s where tensions are running high between the military and the rebel forces. Emma and Nardo, played by LJ Reyes and Anthony Falcon, are refugees living in the valley, and they're visited frequently by a friendly soldier named Joel, played by Luis Alandi. And in the course of 2 hours, secrets start to get revealed and craziness ensues. Now, if you've heard anything about this movie, if you've seen any footage, or if you've read any articles about it, I don't see how you wouldn't get interested, because this is a movie that takes place entirely on a tiny practical set. It's shot in this 4:3 aspect ratio, really desaturated colors, really grainy, and everything is done in one continuous 2-hour long shot. And the first time I heard that, I was like, you know what, I'm in. Like, I'm gonna watch this movie, and I'm so glad to say that this is not just a gimmick. This is a great movie. It uses this visual style to make a point, and it has incredibly complex writing and 3 fantastic performances from its cast. First, I want to touch on the visual look of this movie just a little bit more, because the production design here is very bare, but it's done in such a way that it makes everything feel totally authentic. I mean, you believe that this is a house that 2 refugees living in poverty would be living in. And what's cool is there isn't really one big, wide, establishing shot where we get to see the entire set in one frame. Instead, the view is very constricted, so it makes the whole place feel more like a labyrinth, which is in line with all the secrets being hidden. And when the camera goes outside to the areas surrounding the house, you'll notice that everything is bordered by these black walls. And at first when you see them, you're like, okay, they're black walls, it kind of ruins the illusion. But the more the camera stares into the blackness, it kind of plays with your head, and you begin to see this illusion of it's not just a black wall, but it's just this endless expanse of darkness. And I thought that was really, really cool, especially given the knowledge that there's violence out there, or when they talk about capres, you have this thought that something is standing right there. It's really, really eerie. And yes, compared to other movies of the day, even other Filipino movies, the cinematography doesn't really look good, quote unquote, but I think it was intentionally done because it really adds to the movie and it gives it this found footage sort of immediacy. The sound design here isn't intentionally shoddy like the visuals, but I think that was key in making this movie still watchable, because if this movie had like really grainy visuals and really bad sound, I think the whole thing would be kind of hard to watch. Thankfully, this is still a good mix. There's sounds of like crickets and gunfire in the distance that disturb the silence just a little bit. But without a good director at the helm, all of this is for naught. But thankfully, you've got Jun Lana here who really knows how to navigate this landscape, and he doesn't make the set get in the way of the story. In fact, it's kind of the other way around. He uses blocking and camera placement just so well to play around with point of view and power dynamics, and he really builds up this atmosphere of distrust and paranoia so that by the end of the movie, you are so on the edge of your seat, even if these characters are just kind of sitting down and talking to each other. This is a movie that really comes off more like a play, which really helps because, again, it gives you this immediacy, like it's happening right in front of you. The one scene in this movie that I think some people might take an issue with for being a bit too gratuitous and too long is this really extended sex scene that happens somewhere in the middle of the movie. And at first when I was watching it, I was thinking the same thing. I was like, does this really have to be that long? I promise you, wait till the end of the movie, or at least when things start to get explained, and this sex scene actually, lends itself to the story. It has an emotional kind of meaning. Now, I'm not actually sure if this entire movie has been confirmed to be done in just one shot, because there are sections of the movie where you can tell that, okay, this is where they might have put a cut. But either way, it's still extremely impressive. In fact, these throwaway shots that happen aren't really throwaway shots. Whenever the camera lingers on something for a longer period of time, you know it's relevant. And all of this comes to life thanks to 3 incredible performances from this cast. Everyone is introduced in this movie wearing a certain face, but the movie requires them to be able to turn on a dime when the situation calls for it, and these actors pull it off incredibly well. You totally believe that these 3 actors are playing the same 3 characters all throughout the movie. They're not breaking from character. They're all coming from, one real place. Whether they're quiet and vulnerable or aggressive and scheming, it all completely works. And their chemistry together is just so good. It's so dynamic and it's so believable. And by the end, you can really see that they're all operating on multiple levels. They're not just acting as their characters, but they're also acting to each other. You know, they put on facades for the other people, so their performances are super layered and they're so fascinating to watch. There's not much I can say about the plot in this movie because there are a lot of little impressive twists that happen all throughout, but the most I'll say is that the setting here is perfect and it's really an integral part of the story. All the characters are distinct from one another and you understand what each of them wants, what each of them values, and through really complex dialogue that says one thing on the surface but means something completely different beneath the surface, you really get to know these characters better. If I have any issues with Anino sa Likod ng Buwan, first of all, it's the fact that some of the dialogue can get a bit too exposition heavy, which is fine on its own, but in the context of this movie and of these characters, it doesn't really make any sense because these characters have known each other for a long time, so there's no real reason for them to explain things so thoroughly. It kind of breaks the illusion that this is happening right in front of you. And the pacing does sag in a couple of areas, especially when there's less than 3 characters on screen. Because when there are 3 characters on screen, it gets really tense because people are trying to hide things from each other, but when there are only 2 characters on screen, they get to be a bit more straightforward with each other, so it gets a little less tense, although it's still compelling. Either way, I think Anino sa Likod ng Buwan is a great movie. This is one of those Filipino movies that I wish would get even more attention internationally, not just Lav Diaz, not just Brillante Mendoza, because it really is something so special and unique. Unfortunately, I will not be able to put this on my best of 2016 list because technically this movie did come out last year. It only got a commercial release this year. And my biggest regret is the fact that I only put out this review now. Hopefully, if it's still showing somewhere, you can catch it because it's worth it. Alright, so those are my thoughts on Anino sa Likod ng Buwan. Have you guys seen it? What do you think about it? Whether you agree with me or not, please leave me a comment. Let's have a conversation.